Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Nevada Newsmakers. I'm your special guest host today, Mike Draper, minus the white tennis shoes, filling in for Sam Shad. I'm here today with Sondra Cosgrove, the Executive Director of Vote Nevada and a History Professor of College of Southern Nevada. And we're looking forward to a great discussion about all things election on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Washington's reckless, irresponsible spending is costing Nevadans plenty, and Senator Catherine Cortez Masto has also voted for spending that's even more reckless, allowing COVID relief checks to go to convicted criminals in prison, including the Boston Marathon bomber, a Michigan sex abuser, murderers, and drug dealers, and voting to let COVID checks go to illegal immigrants. Tell Senator Cortez Masto to start voting against reckless and wasteful spending to stop inflation.
Pro Group Management is the place where companies can find workers' comp solutions that are designed to meet their specific business requirements. As regulations evolve, Pro Group takes a proactive approach to clear the path to make sure your business stays ahead of the curve. Knowing your workers' comp program is optimized, you can focus on other important matters related to your growing business. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Brian Culpa Photography was born in the rolling hills of Massachusetts, and now he can help you experience the stunning beauty of Nevada in a whole new way through the power of flight. Flying has always been a passion for Brian, and at Brian Culpa Photography, he can make your imagination soar. Brian has the creative mind and tools to tell your unique story. Experience the bird's eye view at brianculpaphotography.com.
What do you count on? You count on your power every day. At NV Energy, we've always powered what's important to you, but we're not looking at the past. We're focused on the future. While our standards are high, our rates will remain low. And our commitment to renewables isn't just meeting standards, but leading the way. Because you can count on more than just your power. You can count on the company who brings it to you. That's our promise. You can count on it.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
I'm Mike Draper, and we're here for today's Nevada Newsmakers with our guest, Sondra Cosgrove, who's a history professor at the College of Southern Nevada and also the Executive Director of Vote Nevada. Sondra, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I am so glad we have discovered Zoom so we can do these things.
Well, and likewise, and I know it's busy for you between your day job teaching, and certainly I know that a lot of people ask you for insights on the election, so I appreciate you carving out some time.
Well, thank you. I enjoy it.
Well, let's jump right in. Over the weekend, I was reading, there are several stories coming out of Texas and other places about additional election administrators who are being threatened and harassed, needing to quit. And of course, here just a month or so ago, our Washoe County voter registrar quit, and there was stories of death threats and harassment. Is this something that you see is going to be the new norm for us, and that we're going to see this sort of hostility in politics and towards particularly election officials, or do you think this is just sort of still the aftermath of our 2020 election?
I think it's somewhat the aftermath, but we've had periods in our history where this happens. And you have to kind of understand, if you look at the colonial period, if you think about like the Boston Tea Party and the Boston Massacre, I mean, there's all these instances where the colonists kind of rose up, but there was rules about mobbing. It was called mobbing, that you could attack property, you could go out and be very angry, but you don't hurt people. And when you hurt people, that's when you could go to jail. We need to remember that, and we need to make sure that our political officials and our political parties are reminding people that you have free speech rights, you have the right to assemble, you can be very angry, but you don't hurt people. You do not threaten people. So it needs to be stopped. People need to go to jail for stuff like this.
Well, and I think obviously it's not just geared at election administrators. We're seeing that kind of anger and vitriol and certainly frustration across the country from both parties and independents and all of that. You know, as we look ahead towards this next election, particularly in Nevada, speaking of that, there's a lot of variables that go into this next election, and a lot that we have never seen before. We've never seen the rise of independent voters like we've seen this cycle. Certainly we know underrepresented populations and communities feel frustrated and that their votes have just been taken for granted in the past. We're always, young people are a focus. Of these variables, and with the underlying tone that there's a lot of frustration and maybe even hostility, what do you think are the most important variables going into Nevada's 2022 election?
So going into 2022, and kind of, I'm like you, I'm a news junkie, so I'm like reading lots of stuff online and articles. I think we're framing the problem wrong. This almost reminds me of like the Reformation, where you had people saying, I want my soul to be saved. You know, I like to do good deeds. The church is not doing it for me anymore. I need something else. So I'm still very interested in being pious and practicing the religion, but the structure of the church is just not helping me do that. I want something new. Because when I talk to my students, I talk to community members, they're very passionate about issues. They're very passionate about being engaged. But the political party structure and the way the parties manage themselves is turning people off. And so I think there's going to be a reckoning where you have a lot of people just showing up, not looking for the D or the R this time, but thinking who is actually going to advance the issue that I'm interested in. Because that's what my students are telling me they're going to do. And I'm hoping this might nudge the parties to doing something different. But if not, as we know with the Reformation, there was still, you know, the church, but then you had all these splinter denominations that spun off from that. And people just went to the church that then was going to help them save their soul in the way that they felt was best. And so we might see third parties pop up.
Well, and I want to get to that in just a second. I think it's interesting as you relay talking to your students and what your students are saying. And obviously, you've been around Nevada for a long time and talked to a lot of voters and certainly watched a lot of different elections. And each election is different. But we've seen a lot of discussion about voters who might stay home, who feel disenfranchised, who feel like their vote might not matter. Certainly, there might be some that claim election fraud and that their vote doesn't matter, or hear constantly that their votes aren't counted, and so they might stay home. Young people feel disenfranchised and might stay home. Do you see that? Do you expect that we're going to see more of these groups show up, or that we're going to see them stay home for a number of reasons, but really the underlying theme being that it just doesn't matter?
So I've heard a lot of people talk about, is this going to be 2014 again, where we had very low turnout in the general election? I don't think that's going to happen this time, because women are very riled up, and for whichever side you're on, are going to come because of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So there are women who maybe wouldn't have engaged or going to engage. My students are very interested in climate change. And as we see flooding and fires and all that stuff, they're going to show up because of climate change. There's issues that are at an emergency level right now that I think are going to push people that would have stayed home to actually engage. But I think they're going to be saying, okay, who aligns best with my positions and on issues? Not necessarily, I'm just voting for one political party over another. So even though we technically don't have a third party, I think that variable where people are showing up for issues is going to have a kind of effect that a third party would.
I agree with you. Everything I've read kind of points to that, and I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. I want to get into third parties with you on the next break, so I'm going to ask you one more question before we go to break. What are your thoughts on the push by some state officials and certainly several rural counties to adopt measures requiring ballots to be counted by hand?
I oppose it strenuously, because what you're assuming that human beings are not fallible. And we know in our own history, but I also teach Latin American studies. And so I know in Latin America, if you want to pull off fraud in an election, it's the people who are counting the ballots. All of a sudden, the ballots go in the river or somebody's trunk, or they disappear. You can't do that with a machine. So I personally have always been a supporter of using the machines, but then also supporting making sure we have enough money to have them encrypted, that they're double checked by an outside organization, that we're connected with the people who do cybersecurity to make sure that they can't get hacked. So I do not want hand counted ballots, because then you're going to bring in all of the biases that the person counting the ballots has into this equation, and it's just going to cause more problems.
I tend to agree. We celebrate innovation in so many other industries, and I think that it's time that we need to continue to evolve how we do our elections. So I totally agree. Well, let's come back and talk about third parties. Again, we'll be back after the break. I'm here with Sondra Cosgrove, history professor for College of Southern Nevada. Filling in for Sam Shad, I'm Mike Draper.
Leaders find solutions. Politicians are part of the problem. Take Catherine Cortez Masto and Adam Laxalt. Cortez Masto co-sponsored a bill capping insulin costs. Adam Laxalt called a plan that caps costs reckless. No surprise, Laxalt is personally invested in big drug companies. When they make money, he makes money. That's the difference. Catherine Cortez Masto is lowering the cost of drugs. Adam Laxalt sells out and cashes in. SMP is responsible for the content of this ad.
Hi, I'm Renee Summerhour, digital news anchor here at 7 at 7. Watch our streaming nonstop newscast immediately with your mobile phone. 7 at 7 is the new way for you to get every bit of local news you need in just 7 minutes. Breaking news, local neighborhood news, weather, and sports are just a click away. Reporters bring you all of what's happening in the Valley. From Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, YouTube, and more. Get every bit of local news you need from the RJ and LVRJ.com.
Each day, the Children's Advocacy Alliance partners with leaders, legislators, and families across Nevada to improve children's health, education, economic well-being, and safety. We recognize Nevada will be no better than the state of its children. Be a part of this change. Be a supporter of the Children's Advocacy Alliance. For more information, go to caanv.org.
I'm here at the Carson Valley Inn in Minden with Joey Whitaker. One of the things I love about the Carson Valley Inn here in beautiful downtown Minden is CV steak. I have eaten here so many times. Tell folks what they can expect when they come here to eat.
It's a beautiful room, great service. We have certified Angus beef, seafood, lamb, a great range of appetizers, and wonderful desserts. Jean-Michel's done a great job of selecting some beautiful wines for us. The customers love it, and we've got a great selection of cocktails as well. It's not a long way to get away to the Carson Valley Inn.
Modern boutique Ahern Hotel and Events Center in Las Vegas. Host meetings and events on 2 floors. Stay in luxurious rooms and suites. Unlimited branding opportunities. Regional Italian cuisine by Chef Mark Segrisi. Flexible event spaces. Full buyout options. Visit ahernhotel.com today.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
Back to Nevada Newsmakers. I'm your guest host, Mike Draper, filling in for Sam Shad today. And I'm here with history professor Sondra Cosgrove, history professor for College of Southern Nevada and also executive director for Vote Nevada. Sondra, before the break, you talked a little bit about third parties and certainly some of the conversations you've had where people are much more committed to voting for policies, people that align with their policies and not necessarily their parties. Recently, the Pew Research Center did a poll, and I just want to share a little bit of that poll. It said that the unfavorable view of both political parties has risen from 6% in 1994 to 27% today. When asked to respond to the statement that I usually feel that there is at least one candidate who shares most of my views, 43% of people disagree, up from 36% just 4 years ago. And then lastly, 38% strongly agree that I wish there were more political parties to choose from in this country, a figure that includes 48% of independents, 38% of Democrats, and 21% of Republicans. That poll, coupled with things like there's obviously been some national chatter about the Forward Party, the party that Andrew Yang has started that has seen leaders of current and former leaders of both parties come out and endorse it and support it. Do you think now is a time, or that we're on the cusp of there being a time where a viable third party can take hold in this country?
I think so, if it doesn't act like a political party. So, I mean, when you looked at the Protestant Reformation, did you have other denominations that looked exactly like the Catholic Church? No, because people were not asking for that. They were tired of that. But I mean, if you consider in Nevada that 29% of our voters are registered nonpartisan, about another 9 to 10% are affiliated with a non-major party, what if all of those people just stayed just like that? And just were voting for policies and what they wanted to do. We would kind of have like a third party without having a third party.
Yep.
Right? People would just opt out and just vote for policies.
Well, and that's, to your point, that's kind of what we have now, right? When you read polls, you and I both read polls, and the one area that nobody can poll that is probably the most unpredictable yet necessary area is what are independent voters going to do? What are third-party voters going to do in this election cycle? And everybody wants to take a guess, but I think every pollster said, I'm not really sure what they're going to do.
Don't know, right? I mean, and I would ask of the Forward Party. One of my complaints with the two political parties is they don't support down ballot races. In Nevada, they don't support the nonpartisan races. They're too top of the ticket focused. So I would ask Andrew Yang, would your party be willing to actually come in and help develop more candidates for like school board? Because we know we've got issues with school boards, with city councils and controllers and all that type of stuff that we elect here. Would you be willing to focus there instead of top of the ticket? That would be a question I would ask of him.
Well, and I think that goes into another issue that I know you're very passionate about, and certainly you and I have had conversations, and admittedly we've helped on this effort. Is the Nevada Voters First Ballot initiative that's going to be on the ballot in November that implements open primaries and ranked choice voting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. There's been a couple of episodes of this show that have discussed it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that issue and why that's important.
Sure. So I think everyone I've talked to about that ballot initiative, which is open primary top 5 ranked choice voting in the general election, the thing they focus on right away is open primary. They want the primaries to be open. They want more people on the ballot. They want to be able, they don't want to have to switch parties back and forth. They just want to be able to have one ballot and vote for people. But then they say to me, well, why do you have to do that ranked choice voting thing? Well, if we're saying in the top of the ticket races, we want the top 5 candidates to move forward. That way you're getting candidates that don't have big money, but maybe have some really good ideas, because that's another problem in our politics is money. If we push 5 candidates forward, I can't ethically say I want somebody to be elected with 21% of the vote. That's not 80 or 79% of the people said no to that person. There's no way to fix our politics that way. So with ranked choice voting, we make sure that the person with the majority support wins. And so that's why I really support this, because I want to give people that open primary, but then also make sure we have majority support for our elected officials when they get elected.
Well, and I think another part of that, right, is, and you just said it, but to expand on that, something that I've heard in talking to people about this very issue is that they feel that oftentimes our elected officials fail to recognize that they represent and answer to and are accountable to the majority, and not just to the base that voted them in, but to the majority. And one of the things that has appealed to people about this ballot initiative is that it requires there to be a majority, and it encourages, in fact, incentivizes elected officials to reach out to the majority. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. And going even beyond that, so I agree with that. And when you look at the primary that we just had, the Republican turnout in Clark County was almost 38%. They had lots of people on their ballot. It was a good competitive race. The Democratic turnout was very anemic, and it was because on their side, in most races, there was no choice at all. The party insiders had picked who the one candidate was going to be, and maybe there was somebody that was a gadfly, but it wasn't really, a legitimate candidate. So Democrats are like, well, I guess the choices have already been made for us, so why should I show up? But then I had to remind them, because there's nonpartisan races also on our primary, and we elect in those races if you get 50% plus 1.
And with that, we're going to go to break. We'll come back in just a minute with Sondra Cosgrove. I'm Mike Draper, filling in for Sam Shad.
Washington's reckless, irresponsible spending is costing Nevadans plenty, and Senator Catherine Cortez Masto has also voted for spending that's even more reckless, allowing COVID relief checks to go to convicted criminals in prison, including the Boston Marathon bomber, a Michigan sex abuser, murderers, and drug dealers, and voting to let COVID checks go to illegal immigrants. Tell Senator Cortez Masto to start voting against reckless and wasteful spending to stop inflation.
Ahern Rentals began as Signal gas station on Las Vegas Boulevard. Founder John Ahern grew the business by offering rentals. His son Don built on John's legacy, growing Ahern Rentals into the largest independently owned American rental company, with 89 locations in 30 states. Don also brought his experience and vision to equipment manufacturing with Extreme Manufacturing and Snorkel. Today, Ahern Rentals continues to bring its family values to a new generation. Learn more at ahern.com.
The Do It Right guys at Nevada Heating have one mission. Your air conditioner breaks down today. We fix it today. Why sweat for days while your air is down when Nevada Heating can get the job done today and you can get cool again? For nearly 50 years, locally owned Nevada Heating has been getting the job done right. Call today at 323-5585 or see us online at nevadaheating.com.
The Nevada Builders Alliance has been protecting the interests of the construction industry for over 50 years. Our programs save members thousands of dollars every year and allow them to provide much-needed benefits to their employees. Our industry also allows Nevada to grow. If you're thinking about a career in the construction industry, reach out. And if you haven't thought of a career in construction, what are you waiting for? We are the Nevada Builders Alliance.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
Welcome back to Nevada Newsmakers. I'm Mike Draper, your guest host today. Today we're here with Sondra Cosgrove, a history professor at the College of Southern Nevada, also an elections guru here in the state, and the executive director of Vote Nevada. Sondra, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, before we go here with just a couple of minutes left, I'd love to hear from your perspective. What are the important issues that you see going into the 2022 election? This obviously could be a seminal election and then leading into a 2024 presidential election. What do you think are the seminal issues that we're facing as a state?
Nevada is kind of interesting compared to other states because the Roe v. Wade issue is going to be a little bit different here because we locked down our law with a referendum back in 1990. But we have ballot question 1, which is adding an equal rights amendment to the state constitution. So I think the energy that's going towards the abortion issue in other states is going to go towards ballot question 1 here. So I think that's going to be an important issue. But I think, even my friends who have never said one word to me about climate change are really worried about, are we running out of water? What are we doing about development? I think a lot of people are going to want to know, how are we going to have more affordable housing and also take care of our water? So I think it's going to be a lot of really local personal issues that are going to drive people to the ballot.
Have you seen an election cycle, Sondra, in your experience doing this in the state and teaching and consulting? Have you seen an election cycle that could shape up to be quite as unpredictable as this election cycle?
No, and the reason I'm supporting the ballot initiative on open primary with ranked choice voting now is because how large our nonpartisan group has become. And I do know people are being defaulted to nonpartisan at the DMV, but everybody assumed, in the primary, people will realize you need to change and become a Democrat or Republican, and that number will go down. It actually went up. And so people are staying registered nonpartisan, and they're going to go into this election in November as nonpartisans. That is a wild card nobody can predict.
Well, I'm fascinated, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that, in how I don't remember, and certainly you've been doing this longer than I have and have a lot more experience. I don't remember an election cycle where so many people were looking at each election, trying to predict what was going to, at each other state's election, trying to predict what was going to happen, not just in this general election, but trying to predict how the impact would be in 2024. Obviously, that's always been there and an underlying, but that's now something, we're filming this on Monday the 15th, and so a week ago, and certainly there's a lot of people watching some elections today and tomorrow with an eye towards 2024 and what that means. Have you ever seen anything like that?
No, and a lot of it has to do with at the state level. In many states, we can run ballot questions, we can do referenda. And so there are states that have open primaries now. So California's got top 2 and Washington's got top 2. And so all the variables have been changed for this election cycle because the people stood up and said, we're not happy with the way the system's running and we want to do things differently. That's different than like Congress saying we're all going to do something differently, or even state legislatures kind of copying and pasting from each other. When the people stand up through those initiative processes, like the ballot question, all of a sudden every state is completely different. And I don't know how you do an algebra equation to capture that.
And the calculations that are being made at the presidential level and for 2024 based on what happens in 2022 makes everything, puts a spotlight that much brighter on every one of these calculations.
Exactly, because I know, like right now we're on Zoom. I'm on Zoom calls all day with people who want to organize about an issue or organize around a ballot question. We used to have to actually hand manage people, getting people in a room to do that. It is so much easier to do individual organizing now.
I agreed. Well, Sondra, I really appreciate your time today. I will share that this is my second time guest hosting, and when I told Sam that I wanted to have you on, he said we're long overdue to have Sondra on, and was thrilled that you were going to be a guest. And I'm sure leading up to November, this won't be the last time you'll be on this show, but I certainly appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And with that wraps up another episode of Nevada Newsmakers. I'm Mike Draper. Thank you for joining us.
With Nevada's only transplant center and verified burn center, the science is here. With award-winning cardiologists and the state's only dedicated heart failure clinic, the talent is here. With Nevada's most advanced robotic surgery, the technology is here. And with the Silver State's only designated pediatric trauma center, hope is here. All because we are here. UMC.
I'm here at the Carson Valley Inn in Minden with Joey Whitaker. One of the things I love about the Carson Valley Inn here in beautiful downtown Minden is CV steak. I have eaten here so many times. Tell folks what they can expect when they come here to eat.
It's a beautiful room, great service. We have certified Angus beef, seafood, lamb, a great range of appetizers, and wonderful desserts. Jean-Michel's done a great job of selecting some beautiful wines for us. The customers love it, and we've got a great selection of cocktails as well. It's not a long way to get away to the Carson Valley Inn.
A bird's eye captures its surroundings at different heights. At Brian Culpa Photography, we can make your imagination soar over buildings, parks, cityscapes, and beyond. Brian's images tell the story and get the job done. If you need a new perspective to tell your story, contact Brian today. Brian Culpa Photography. Experience the bird's eye view at brianculpaphotography.com.
Safety is the #1 priority for the trucking industry. Over $7 billion a year is spent on technology like this electronic eye that will apply the brakes automatically. But the most important factor for safety is the truck driver. These hardworking men and women who safely move over 70% of our nation's freight and 94% of Nevada's. We thank you because trucks move America forward.
Southwest Specialties has been making the homes and businesses of Nevada beautiful for more than 20 years. Their experienced designers and craftsmen create the walkways, backyards, water features, and a variety of outdoor cooking areas that add curb appeal and value to your investment. Call today or visit them at their website and see how they can make your outdoor spaces special. Southwest Specialties, creative, distinctive, beautiful.
Your good times are at Tamarack Casino. All new DC Cafe and Bar, serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Your good times at Tamarack.
Your good times are at Tamarack Casino.
Thanks for joining us today on Nevada Newsmakers. You can catch today's show or any of our past episodes by visiting NevadaNewsmakers.com, and make sure to follow us across all our social media platforms. Have a great day.